joining us tonight on the program. Professor Prof Odinkalu is here, still here with me. Thank you so much, Prof. And I'm being joined by another professor, this time around, a lawyer, Professor Chidi Odinkalu, former chair of the National Human Rights Commission, who joins us virtually from London. Thank you so much, and it's good to see you again, Prof.
Thanks a lot.
A few days ago, you heard at the valedictory session of the Nigerian Senate, Senator Bulkachuwa, what he said about his colleagues and the pressure they put on him to put pressure on his wife. But let me remind you of what was said.
I must thank particularly my wife, whose freedom and independence I encroached upon while she was in office. And she has been very tolerant and accepted my encroachment and extended her help to my colleagues.
Distinguished, please, I don't think this is a good idea, go in this direction. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea, please.
That was perhaps not the only thing that was said. When Senator Rochas Okorocha also stood up, this time around he was making reference to how the Senate President Ahmed Lawan got into office. But let me allow you to hear from Senator Rochas Okorocha.
We shall all stand to say Nigeria is a great country. And to those of you, our colleagues, including you, Mr. Senate President, you know you're a very smart politician. How you came back is yet another political book to discuss.
Sorry?
I say how you came back is another chapter in our political history.
How I came back from where?
Mr. President, how you return to the Senate as a senator will open another chapter of great discussion in our political book. Because I was there in the field with you running for president. I never knew how you were able to meander and return and leaving some of us. Next time you must teach me how to do that.
It was easy. It was easy. I was there with you in the field, but after our defeat, my constituents thought they needed me again.
Well, that gets our attention. Let me bring in first Professor Chidi Odinkalu. The NBA has reacted to these, asking for the prosecution based on the statement that are being made. What is your own view about this issue, politics and the pressure on our judiciary?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Michelle. I don't know what aspect of that you want my views on.
Let's begin with Senator Bulkachuwa's statement.
Yeah, I thought Senator Bulkachuwa spoke with tremendous clarity. His diction is sensational. Nobody can accuse him of having been inebriated, except with tremendous love for his wife. And when you love your wife so much, you have to call her corrupt judge on the floor of the Senate. I mean, that's the height of love, because that's precisely what he did. And now, whether the corruption was exercised in favor of his partners in crime in the Senate, or in favor of others not on the floor of the Senate, is immaterial. Now, I find it quite informative that in law there is something called spousal privilege, which is that one partner to a marriage would be precluded from testifying against the other partner to the marriage based on the assumption that 1 + 1 in marriage is 1. So in this, there is spousal privilege and there is parliamentary privilege. And Senator Bulkachuwa was in the rather special situation of being able to exercise both privileges at the same time. But he decided in this case to override spousal privilege with parliamentary privilege. And the question now must be how to treat this. Now, what he said on the floor of the Senate is one thing. What actually happened or transpired is another thing. A lot of reaction has been raised, obviously, about what he said on the floor of the Senate. But the real issue is what actually transpired. Because if what he said actually did happen, it is beyond a scandal. Now, the National Judicial Council met yesterday in its 122nd statutory meeting and somehow managed to wimp out on that particular episode, managing to say nothing about it. And the president of the Nigerian Bar Association then issued this scandalous statement, in my view, in which he purported to speak on behalf of the National Judicial Council, which he does not have the capacity to do, not being the presiding officer, nor the spokesperson of the National Judicial Council. And he's giving us reported speech claiming that the National Judicial Council condemned what Senator Bulkachuwa did. But it is not clear what Senator Bulkachuwa did, whether it is what they are condemning. In any case, the National Judicial Council, being a deliberative body, cannot condemn what it has not investigated. And I find it very significant that neither the National Judicial Council institutionally nor the Office of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, as the chair of the National Judicial Council, are willing to stand up and say what they will do about this. It is not up to the chairperson, president of the NBA, to speak for the National Judicial Council. So his statement, in my view, was tragically an attempt at a cover-up of what is, without a shadow of doubt, the most significant blot on record of on judicial integrity and independence in Nigeria as we speak.
So, I mean, what are the implications on the judiciary if these kind of statements are coming out? Perhaps the kind of pressure that Senator Bulkachuwa is pleading on the encroachment, that, I mean, this is coming to light now based on the statement or what you will say. I mean, I'm not sure this is an admission. This is somewhat a confession, I mean, if in some way. But what do you make of the impact on the judiciary?
Do you want me to be honest, or do you want me to play public relations?
No, please, go ahead, be honest.
Because if you want me to be honest, anybody who knows the judicial system will tell you that all of us know that this is what has been happening. The only difference here is that a man who has been actively involved in procuring these unseemly outcomes in the system has, under whatever influence, certainly not of alcohol, if I may, nor of psychotropic substances, it seems evident. Those are the only two influences I would exclude from this particular situation. But having been involved in this, he's chosen to come clean. Now, this man who presided over that particular session, Senator Ahmed Lawan, came back to the Senate on the basis of one of the most scandalous judgments the Supreme Court has ever rendered. And not even the justices of the Supreme Court who sat on the panel that gave that decision can rationalize what they decided. The only way that anyone can explain the decision that returned Ahmed Lawan to the Senate has to be that it was procured by the kind of influence that Senator Bulkachuwa was talking about. He has been succeeded by another senator, my good brother, Godwin Emefiele, who did not run for the role of a senator. So he was defeated. The person who won the role was former DIG Ipodum, and he was robbed by judicial process. The man who led the campaign for Godwin Emefiele, the immediate past Ebonyi State governor, again ran for president. He is in the Senate. And all of this has been procured by scandalous, utterly scandalous, inexplicable judicial decisions from the Supreme Court, or in any case, from appellate courts. And now we are getting to hear from the insiders, how they procure these criminal judgments, bringing our judicial system into disrepute. And because they are complicit in this, the judges who sit in the NJC will be unwilling and unable to factually investigate this because they'll be investigating themselves.
Okay, so quickly, before I bring back Professor Chidi Adibe, there's been an arrest and the suspension of Mr. Godwin Emefiele, the suspension and investigation of Mr. Bauer. In the eye of the law, what do you make of these circumstances?
Look, I have no sympathy for Godwin Emefiele. I will not say much more beyond that. I'm already on record. I've written up my views on his tenure as CBN governor. I quite genuinely and honestly believe that quite a good bit of what transpired under his tenure as CBN governor was criminal. You know, whatever fate befalls him within the legal process, I will not shed a tear for him. And I'm not even sure that he would want any of us to shed a tear for himself, because I'll be scandalized if he did not realize that a good deal of what he did was beyond the realm of criminality. This is my view, mind you. Now, with the EFCC, I am at the moment, you see, I've got a problem here. Every EFCC chair, bar none, has come to grief. And so the question one has got to ask is it the job or is it the politics? But something is wrong. It cannot be that every chair of the EFCC since Nuhu Ribadu gets fired, and all we are focused on is the musical chairs and not the idea that something is fundamentally wrong. And so why would anyone want the job if you're guaranteed to be fired? If the country does not want to fight corruption properly or at all, or does not want anyone to do it, then let's scrap the position and scrap the institution. But the idea that whenever a new president comes in, they've got to fire or humiliate or terminate or exterminate the incumbent in the office of the chairperson of the EFCC is offensive in my view. There is something to me that just does not sit right about that. So in many ways, my perspective on Emefiele is quite different from my perspective on Bauer. I'm not convinced that we are treating the position of the chair of the EFCC as it should be treated.
I'll come back to you just in a moment, because I'd like to get your legal opinion on those who believe that the DSS does not have any business investigating issues relating to money laundering or financial crimes and all of that. They can investigate issues relating to national security. Those are, I mean, that's a school of thought, but I'll come back to you just in a moment. And that's your write-up on Godwin Emefiele's overdue dessert. I'd like you to touch on it before we go on the program. But Prof Adibe, give us a sense of what is happening. It does look like there is some kind of tsunami, and we may have not seen the end to these removals, these suspensions, and these uprooting of some people at the helm of affairs, especially within the security and the investigation agencies. What do you make of this generally?
Well, I generally, first of all, most governments that will come into power will make fighting corruption one of the planks of their governance. And when you go after perceived big people, somehow it satisfies a section of the population that are, looking for people who take down on their perceived social class or ethnic enemies. But the way I see it is that it often creates more problems than it solves, because there is the politics that is involved, managing the politics of every removal. I give you an example. When he removed Emefiele, which I believe he really committed a number of infractions, most annoyingly trying to run for APC primaries while clinging to his job. But then as soon as you do it, people will start raising questions. One, Why? What is the metric criteria for picking on Emefiele and leaving A, B, C, D, E? And, oh, you did it because you wanted somebody from your own ethnic group who is actually a mechanical engineer to be the CBN. And that goes on each time you start with this sacking. I would have preferred a situation where, given the fact that he came in with a narrow legitimacy base, at least the first 6 months, try to consolidate on what you're trying to do. And before you start this sack, because it's going to continue. And each time, when
so there's likely to be more, isn't it?
Yeah, when you hear, because the pressure will be there. When you hear people say corruption fighting back, what they are trying to tell you is that they are not able to manage the politics. I'll give you an example. Shortly after Lawal, the invasion of the judges at midnight, I think it was around 2018 or thereabout. It coincided with a time I was to give a lecture there. And one thing I told them was, look, I disagree with what you people did. Of course, you could, I mean, you're there and you could put me behind the border. But they got the politics right. The politics was that they made sure that they went together. I mean, they identified a number of them from different ethnic and religious groups, so nobody could accuse them of ethnic or religious bias. So getting the politics right is one thing. So if you don't get the politics right, now, for example, people are already imputing several motives and compiling names, say, if you don't go after this man, then this is vendetta. And often, without knowing it, you respond to those pressures. And by so doing, you leave the art of governance. How many people that were investigated? What came out of several investigations? So I think I am not really a fan of people starting with trying to undo their predecessors. And before you know it, you are getting closer. Some of the things that Emefiele, was said to have done, and he did quite a couple of things wrong. For example, literally taking over the functions, what should be the functions of ministries of agriculture and water resources in a bid to ingratiate himself to some power brokers. Before you know it, you are getting closer. If it is, as people suspected or alleged, that it's because of Naira redesign, then Buhari had come up and said, look, I approved it. So you are now very, very close to getting to people pointing you, why are you not going to Buhari? And in another breath, people were mentioning Dangote. Are you going to go after these people?
All right. Let me get Professor Odinkalu's final thought. Godwin Emefiele, the article you wrote about the list of the things infractions that you raised allegedly, but again, is the legality of what the DSSE is doing. Are you also of that school of thought?
Legality of what? Now, look, the SSS is set up by Section 1 of the National Security Agencies Act of 1986. And I listened to the conversation that preceded this and all of the stuff about whether or not the president will redesignate or not redesignate National Security Advisor. No, he can't. The Coordinator of National Security is created under Section 4 of the National Security Agencies Act, which is entrenched by Section 318 of the 1999 Constitution. The president cannot redesignate that because entrenchment under Section 318 means that you can only amend the National Security Agencies Act by the procedure for amending the Constitution. So let's get out of that stuff. He can appoint as many advisors as he wants. The Constitution allows him to do that, but he cannot redesignate Coordinator of National Security. Now, the question as to what the SSS can do. The SSS has powers, and I call it SSS, not DSS, because the entity created by the National Security Agencies Act is SSS, not DSS. You cannot amend the name of the entity as a matter of law. So when I say SSS, it's the same thing you're talking about. The SSS cannot be, the powers are there under the law. Number one, crimes of internal security. Number two, crimes related to classified, non-military classified matters or other issues that the president may assign to them to do. I don't know what the president has assigned them to do. So I am not able to, but in any case, instrument number 1 of 1999 enables the SSS with the same powers as the police. So in respect of issues in relation to which they have substantive powers of investigation, they have police powers. And police powers include investigation and prosecution. Now, Don't ask me whether I like this. That is what the law is. Full stop.
All right. Professor Chidi Odinkalu, it's good to see you. Thank you for being honest, although in a troublemaking manner, because there are a lot of people that won't be happy about it. But if it's the truth, who cares? Thank you so much, Professor Chidi Odinkalu, for coming on tonight. Professor Chidi Adibe, thank you so much indeed for your time also.
Thank you.